Hey, I'm Osman Faruqi, and this is The Drop, a culture show from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, where we dive into the latest in the world of pop culture and entertainment. I'm here with Thomas Mitchell. What's up, King? How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Excited for this one. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. It's nice of you to ask. You don't often ask me how I'm doing.
Well, no, you put this on me now. So now I have to.
I was laughing before we sat down to record because I don't know if you've seen, there's this viral tweet going around where people are just like, share your favorite scene from Girls, the HBO show. And I just rewatched the clip of Marnie singing Stronger by Kanye West at the, it's so funny, man. It's one of the funniest things that has been put to air in the past decade.
That was big Kendall L to the OG.
100%. That's a very, very, very good comparison.
I've seen lots of girls chat, obviously, because was it like 10 years or something, 12 years, some kind of anniversary?
Yeah, just like a lot of people have rediscovered the show, I think, which is kind of cool. And there's a whole Lena Dunham discourse, right? Like people like, we were too mean to her and she's actually really ahead of her time. I probably fell into that category. I don't think I gave Girls its flowers when it was out. It is a pretty good show, particularly the first season. My
favorite scene also involves Marnie, but it's a different scene.
We'll save that one for the Patreon podcast. Look, we got a big movie-focused episode for you guys today. We're talking two of the biggest, buzziest releases of the year so far. Civil War, the incredibly incendiary and intense, action-packed film from Alex Garland starring Kirsten Dunst, and Challenges, the Zendaya-led film, the latest by Luca Gaudignino. Two very different movies, but I think both are very ripe for conversation and analysis. They're going to be some of the talkiest movies in a while, I reckon. Before we get into those, a couple of things I wanted to cover. Taylor Swift, our friend, is back. New album out on Friday, I think Friday afternoon, Australian time. The rollout for this one has well and truly begun. I'm not sure if you saw this, but in LA starting this week, Spotify and her label have teamed up to host this Tortured Poets Department pop-up at a local library in LA. The quote from Spotify is pretty funny. There were a few concepts that we discussed. Creating a bedroom, a creative office, a stack of books. But ultimately, we all landed on an album-themed open-air library in which lyrics would be revealed over the course of the week leading into the album's release. So fans can go to this library and hunt for lyrics which are on this kind of tea-stained, old-timey paper, and they'll be revealed throughout the week. And I gotta say, man, like, I know this isn't unique to Taylor and everyone gets mad when you point out things that she does that everyone else does, blah, blah, blah. But it did feel very odd. I saw some photos of these lyrics on Instagram, these lyric sheets at this library, and they've got her poems or whatever, and then stamped on every page is a giant Spotify logo. And this sort of jarred, right? Because this is an artist who has criticized streaming so frequently. She took her music off Spotify for 3 years. In 2014, when she was talking about streaming, she said, Spotify, it all feels to me a bit like a grand experiment, and I'm not willing to contribute my life's work to an experiment that I don't feel fairly compensates the writers, producers, artists, and creators of this music. And I just don't agree with perpetuating the perception that music has no value. Now look, it's been 10 years, it's a long time, but it's a big turnaround to go from I don't really like the way streaming devalues art to I am now letting Spotify brand themselves all over my lyrics. Like, this might seem a small plot, but I wonder if it's all getting a little bit too contradictory. Like, the bigger Taylor gets as this big corporate juggernaut who's everywhere, juxtaposes with the, oh shucks, I'm just like a girl writing about like my little poems. I have a feeling, I'm interested in your view on this, is Tortured Poets the moment coming off the back of the Eras tour where everyone starts to just say, it's gotten a little bit too out of hand, Taylor?
I do think so. I think firstly, I don't know, didn't we all agree to leave like big brand activations in like the late 2010s where they belong? I just like, does Taylor
That's a
Swift
really good point.
Does Taylor Swift need to create an open air library? Like, that's not going to move the needle on how many people listen to her music. I don't know, I just think brand activations generally are pretty lame and very hard to get right. So much like flash mobs, I hope they die a death really soon. But yeah, I do think I felt a bit weird about this album coming out this week generally because I know, again, I'm supposed to feel excited, and I do feel excited, but I do still maintain, even from the minute she, stole the show at the Grammys and announced it, that just like we all need a bit more breathing room. Like I said, from Taylor and Taylor Mania, she's had this incredibly successful world tour, this 3-hour massive box office hit film, and it just feels like sometimes there is too much of a good thing. We're still enjoying and processing Cowboy Carter, and now we've got to take on another album from arguably the only other as influential pop star. So yeah, I don't know, but in terms of what you're saying, yeah. Look, maybe she's in her experimental era now.
Yeah, I'm struggling to articulate what feels weird about all of this because I'm sure fans could nitpick and say it's just a marketing thing, like let her do it. But I think you're right that it feels you need a bit of space for a big, new, exciting project to feel big, new, and exciting. And it doesn't really feel like we've had enough space. And I know that like the Taylor Swift fans are very excited about this and they'll be passing over all of these lyrics. But I also have to say, man, we're like 3 days out from this album coming out and it doesn't feel like it, like it doesn't feel like there's a lot of anticipation or buzz in the air. And I think this album is obviously still going to sell a bunch of copies. Like she's got so many fans, she could do anything and go to number one. But I do wonder whether there's just been an oversaturation and we look back on the Tortured Poets sort of moment or era as one where it was just a bit too much too soon. It just doesn't feel like the streets are hungry for it in a way they have been for other projects.
Yeah, and Taylor famously has the ear of the streets, so I'm shocked by. But yeah, I think I do tend to agree, and like no doubt, as you said, like it will be an enormous success. But I definitely do think the appetite is not quite there, and it feels like even the last album wasn't really that long ago.
I mean, she won Album of the Year like 4 months ago, right, for the last album, and now there's the new one coming out.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what people make of it. And no doubt, like I am very much intending to listen to it over the weekend, but I wouldn't say my level of like personal anticipation and buzz is peaking. I'm just kind of like, okay, we're back in Taylor mode again. Well,
she was also all over our social feeds this week at Coachella. She was there with Travis Kelce, your best friend. She was photographed like hanging out in the crowd, which is pretty cool. Seems like it's nice for a celebrity to have a nice time. I think she's actually talked previously about how she's always wanted to go to Coachella, but just didn't think she'd be able to enjoy herself because of the fan, I guess, madness around her. She checked out Australian artist Dom Dollar, people like him, Rhyme Dust. That's certainly a song people like. Happy for him to have Taylor and Travis rocking up. Did you follow much of the Coachella excitement over this weekend?
Yeah, I kind of checked it out. It's weird because it's become one of those things that you can't really avoid now. It's just like as you kind of refresh Instagram and you find out like what's going on at Coachella. And I feel like over the last few years, Coachella's become almost like a parody of itself in a way. It's like this, content machine where celebrities go to appear to be normal or something. And they like partake in this performative like regular man type thing where they're just walking around in their festival clothes and like checking out their friends' acts and stuff. But it all feels a bit fake to me. I don't know.
It does feel like it's almost like a pantomime of a festival. Like people started making fun of Coachella because it became this influencer kind of focused, celebrity focused festival. But yeah, you're right. It feels like they've just totally leaned into that. And now most of what you see at Coachella is like a bit of who's performing and who's not and who's tanking and who's doing well. But then also just pages and pages of which celebs are going in the crowd and hanging out. There was some cool stuff. When I say cool stuff from a content perspective, the thing that I saw the most on my feed was Grimes' set where she just couldn't beat match and had a bit of a tantrum. That feels like you're kind of like high school nightmare where you wake up and you're at school and you're not wearing any clothes. It was really hard to watch.
Yeah, it was like a talent quest gone bad. I mean, between that and then Damon Albarn of Blur obviously abusing people. But this is what I mean. Like, even that is funny because, like, Blur are a fun band. They're a weird choice for a festival that's, like, really populated by probably, like, younger people, especially now, an influencer-heavy crowd.
Yep.
Like, do they give a fuck about Song 2 or, like, Park Life and stuff?
Definitely. That to me was really interesting because people are like, oh, the Coachella crowd doesn't deserve Blur. I'm like, the Coachella crowd are, like, 19, 20 years old. They don't know who Damon Albarn is. I had this experience at Splendor a couple of years ago where Liam Gallagher played, and I've always wanted to see Oasis live at a festival. Never thought that I would, and I'm like, this is sick. And in my head, I imagined this thing where the amphitheater, is like 20,000 people all singing Wonderwall. It was like one of the quietest sets of that festival, because I think most of the younger people were there for like Jack Harlow, and they're like, why is this old man swearing at me and like drinking on stage? It's this funny thing where it's like festival music people want acts from a certain generation, but what the kids want to pay lots of money to see is something a bit more contemporary and good.
Yeah, I know. And obviously we've been talking so much about like, I guess the festival ecosystem and what it takes. And I would say that, like Splendor has been accused of kind of leaning heavily into the nostalgia acts while occasionally throwing in like something like sprinkling it with contemporary. And I don't necessarily know if, Splendor was to rebrand and come back as a Coachella, kind of like type celebrity festival and how you even do that. But yeah, it's just a very strange thing. Like even at that top level, and Coachella is, probably one of the most famous festivals, there's still obviously a bit of a disconnect where, you have your Damon Albarn and Blurs playing to a crowd of people who don't really know who they are. The only other thing I found interesting is that, like I've been, I guess, interested in the reviews. I saw that Lana Del Rey did not seem to blow people away opening night. She's a funny festival act in that her music, doesn't really, it's in terms of like a festival crowd opening night, you know what you're getting from her, and it probably isn't going to get you jazzed.
Yeah, I was a bit sad to see that didn't seem to hit. Like, I love Lana, but yeah, some of the clips I saw seemed a little bit phoned in, and like you said, maybe doesn't work in a big open air festival setting. Vampire Weekend, my guys are there. They brought Paris Hilton out, which is pretty funny. But again, that just sort of feels like peak, like mid to late 2000s, more than it, felt like it would resonate for the younger crowd that were there. It is interesting. I wasn't necessarily expecting Coachella to be this big talking point because we'd heard that ticket sales hadn't, I guess, been as big as they have been in the past. I don't think it's sold out. It's over 2 weekends now, so it kind of is diffused the way that people talk about it. But obviously, it still has some of the biggest artists in the world, and Billie Eilish jumped up on stage with Lana, so you're going to get these moments that are going to get people talking about it, which is probably good for the festival in terms of its longevity. And yeah, how does something like Splendor recreate that? I mean, there was that year where Elon Musk and Amber Heard were spotted. That feels like a lifetime ago. Maybe you and I need to just like, go more and post more, and people are like, wow, is that Thomas and Oz? That's Splendor?
I was more thinking that we might like be called in to curate or something. I mean, we often think that the solve to most issues is that you and I get put in charge and then we just fix it.
Yeah, from the Lokis to Splendor, just let us produce the event.
Yeah, that's probably more of an us problem that we can unpack off air.
All right, let's talk movies. Should we start with Civil War?
19 states have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
This movie, it cost $50 million to make. It's the biggest budget film from both A24, one of your favorite studios, Thomas, if not your favorite studio, and from the writer and director Alex Garland, who's best known for writing the book The Beach, which was adapted into the film starring Leonardo DiCaprio. He also wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later. He directed Ex Machina, Annihilation, Men. This is his latest. It's set in an America torn apart by civil wars, a strongman third-term president played by Nick Offerman attempting to face down a military uprising from various different factions across the country. The film focuses on 4 journalists, a seasoned war photographer played by Kirsten Dunst, a younger photographer who idolizes her, played by Priscilla's Kaylee Spaney, and 2 reporters, Wagner Moura and Stephen McKinley Henderson. The film is kind of like a road movie meets a war movie. The 4 journalists are on this mission to travel towards Washington, D.C. and try and secure an interview with the president before these rebel factions take over the country. Along the way, they see the Civil War firsthand. They witness various battles. They go to a refugee camp and they look at how the war is impacting different parts of the country in different ways. I think while the action in this movie is very intense and very gripping, and the sound design in particular is very jolting, the climactic sequence is a very intense and big battle scene. The movie was way less about war than I thought it would be. It was way more about journalism and some of the questions around war journalism and how journalism operates in this kind of modern era of extreme political division than I expected it to be from both the trailer and the early conversation around it. Thomas, what did you make of this film?
Yeah, it definitely was a different film to what I think I was expecting, which is, from what I can gather, the surface level take for most people. And that then kind of bleeds into what some people's issue with the film is, but we can kind of get into that. But I really enjoyed it. For me, it was almost like this old-fashioned blockbuster, like almost an Independence Day style film. I couldn't get that film out of my head, actually. Like, you know, in terms of just like, it's a road movie. They're trying to get one place to another. Every stop along the way offers some kind of challenge. It was very much like a more traditional, old-fashioned film than I expected. And because of that, I really enjoyed it. Great performances across the board. I think this was a performance from Kirsten Dunst, who we know is, you know, kind of started out as this weird, like, you know, teen film star, but is now like such an amazing actress with an incredible body of work. And yeah, it just really kind of like sucked me in. It was a great example of an end of the world kind of dystopic film. But yeah, basically every major thing you're looking for. So like performances, the way it looked, the way it sounded, the choices. I thought it was, yeah, probably one of my favorite A24 films, which is really saying something.
Yeah, wow, interesting. You sort of hinted at it, like, I feel like this movie is a real classic example of the way that discourse just washes everything else away. Like, it's interesting to try and have a conversation about the film, but I guess like America being in an election year, this movie being called Civil War, immediately just had everyone's antennas alert, and they're like, okay, what side is this film going to weigh on? And, you know, the people were pointing out in the trailer, there's this faction that is the Texas-California alliance. That makes no sense because Texas is a red state and California is a blue state. And why would they be in an alliance? And that has filtered through even post the movie being out. And it seems like a lot of people kind of lost their minds about those elements of the film. What did you make of the reaction? And I'm interested whether you have much of a relationship to like Alex Garland generally and any of his earlier films that maybe gave you a sense of expectation with this one.
Yeah, well, I guess this is kind of like strictly in the Alex Garland wheelhouse. This may not shock you. In fact, I suspect it will not, but I loved The Beach, his book. Obviously, they made the film that starred Leonardo DiCaprio.
Let me guess, you read that on a backpacking trip in Southeast Asia?
It's so depressing that I am so predictable. I read it when I was in Vietnam, and I basically was like looking for a Tilda Swinton type figure to take me under her wing. But yeah, like I loved that. And then obviously, I think, you know, Ex Machina is an incredible film, and it feels probably more poignant now than ever. And in some great performances. 28 Days Later, I also loved. So yeah, I am someone who, when Alex Garland has a project, I'm definitely curious to see what it is. This did feel like an extension of his brand and his work. It's very much in his wheelhouse. But yeah, I just, it's so funny that people are so stuck on this issue with the film and with him about like, well, why didn't you choose a side?
Yeah, I wonder whether part of that is still with the fact that he's a British director and he's weighing in on American politics, and Americans are sort of just getting their backs up a little bit about it. Like, I was not expecting this to be like exposition filled and didactic, where he's like, okay, let me tell you about what happened in this universe in 2024 that led to X, Y, and Z, because these other movies you mentioned, like Ex Machina, I rewatched Annihilation as well. These are movies where he's grappling with ideas now, in the case of Ex Machina, like AI and like where this stuff could go in the future. They don't really have heaps of exposition. He's not explaining every single part of this world and how it would work and then saying, here's an example of it playing out. He's just kind of pushing you to think about certain different things. So I didn't have that expectation, and I'm sort of surprised that a lot of people did. And I don't know if the movie would be better if there was all this like backstory to how we got to this point. You're dropped in the middle of a conflict. You have a vague sense that there's these different factions. You don't totally know what everyone believes in, but you get a pretty clear sense from the way that the president is kind of coded that this is a Trump-like figure. Like, the desire for a director to hold an audience's hand more than this, I find confusing, and I wonder whether part of it is, maybe this is too unfair, I wonder whether part of this is, you know, the Marvel movies and sort of like the biggest tentpole films over the last decade or so have been so, these are the goodies and these are the baddies and this is how stuff works. And when something is a little bit more ambiguous, people lose their minds. Like, one of the movies I thought about, you mentioned Independence Day, I was thinking about Children of Men, which is one of my favorite movies, Alfonso Cuarón. And that is a similar film in that you're dropped into this world. It's a dystopian future. you know that the government is pretty totalitarian. You don't really know who's in charge. You don't know exactly how we got to this point, but that doesn't matter. You just get a sense of how the world is working, and then you understand the stakes through interactions that happen at a much smaller scale. I thought this movie did a really good job of that. Did you feel like it would have been better if you had an understanding of the political factions involved and their ideological motivation?
No, I don't think so, but I do kind of understand why people might be frustrated. Like, we're so conditioned now to look for like ideological meaning in everything, let alone a movie called Civil War that, on surface level appears to be like ripped out of the, January 6th Capitol uprising. There's so much in this that people might recognize. And so you do kind of go in with this like expectation that you're going to get that type of film. And I also think like, cynically, people suspect maybe did Garland like not pick a side, so he didn't alienate anyone, so therefore, like in bottom line terms, like the box office would be bigger. Like if this came in and everyone was like, this is a real liberal, like blue state movie, then like all of the, red state people are just like not going to go and see it. And I mean, funnily enough, all of this conversation at the end of the day, I don't think it really even matters. Like I was reading all the different reviews, and I mean, this won't shock you, but Breitbart, the review is... like the headline is Civil War Review, ridiculously dopey anti-Trump snuff film. So like these, rusted on sides are going to see what they want to see anyway. I don't personally feel this way, but I can see why people are frustrated or suspicious of Garland's like, refusal to give us too much color in terms of like who is what and what we should feel, and especially what our four main characters, like where they sit. Like, yeah, we do suspect that Nick Offerman is a Trump-like figure and how we're kind of it's easy to know how we're supposed to feel about him, but the rest of everything, like the rest of it remains kind of like ambiguous.
That Breitbart review is really interesting because I feel like most of what I read is from liberal, lefty-leaning like New York and LA critics, and I feel like their criticism is more, we're looking down the barrel of potentially another Trump presidency. A director is making like this film called Civil War. Why isn't he saying that Republicans are evil and Democrats are good? And I think that's interesting because I think when people say this movie's too apolitical, I actually think what they mean is it's too like non-partisan. And I guess by that, I mean, they are maybe wanting a Democrat versus Republican narrative, a good versus bad, but that doesn't exist. But there's politics throughout this movie. Like there are explicit conversations about race and who belongs and the way that people from different parts of the country react to war versus others. I think that is all there, but that's like small p politics, and maybe that's not enough for some people who want it to be a bigger lesson about the warnings of Trump. And maybe what people are brushing up against as well is, I think that's part of this movie that is also saying the people on the other side to a Trumpian figure are not necessarily perfect. Like who knows what their motivations really are, and war is crazy and bad, and civil war is insane. And even if you think there's a good side and a bad side, both sides will commit atrocities and do bad things. That tends to be the nature of kind of conflict. And that's a bit ambiguous. That's morally like unclear. And for a lot of people who are freaking out in America about what the election might portend, maybe they think that it's not clear enough. But I think it's more interesting in a way to make a film where you're not saying this side is unambiguously good and this side is unambiguously bad. You're just saying if we got to a point where violent military conflict erupted in America, it would probably look a little bit like this, and it would make you second guess who you thought was clearly right and who you thought was clearly wrong.
And I guess that is the thing of like having this Western forces that is made up of California and Texas, like two, politically diametrically opposed forces. It's like the ultimate get out of jail free card.
Yeah,
for Garland,
totally.
He's like, okay, well, I've done this. So like, it's almost like this is the world we're in. Like it is the near future, but it's definitely a different world to the one we currently exist in. And then so like all bets are off, which again, I can see how people are like, oh, well, that's a bit tricky. You want the like relevancy and the punch of making a movie in 2024 that feels so like disturbingly poignant, but then you're like putting in these like safeguards to make sure people can't like criticize too much that did you like pull your punches on what really mattered?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think though, if anyone is in doubt as to what Garland is saying in this movie, and even if he isn't shouting it from the rooftops in every scene, it comes at this point towards the end of the movie. The scene that I think a lot of critics have said is one of the standouts of the year. I think you and I both love it too. The Jesse Plemons scene, and we won't give too much away for people who haven't seen the movie, but it is a very explicit, I guess, like reckoning with a lot of things happening in America right now about what makes an American. Like that's the line Jesse Plemons says, what kind of American are you? It's in the trailer. When it plays out in the film, it is like you don't breathe for the 2 or 3 minutes that this is happening. And I don't, maybe that's what Breitbart doesn't like. I think if you're not sure what side the movie's on, you get to that scene, you're like, oh, okay, I think I'm pretty clear about the kind of world Alex Garland wants us to live in and the one that he doesn't want us to live in.
Yeah, that was definitely the best scene of the movie, and the one I think that people walk away from, and will remember. I'm always impressed. Just as a side note, like he's in the movie for like 5 minutes, Jesse Plemons, and he like steals the whole show. Yeah, that's very impressive.
It's incredible, and I think partly why it works is he's such a menacing character, but I guess his physicality and a lot of the roles that he plays tend to not be like villainous and menacing. I mean, obviously, like, he famously killed that person in Friday Night Lights in that terrible, terrible season. But since then, he's sort of like kind of gregarious and, he can be a little bit like inquisitive and menacing. Like it was a little bit when he was the investigator in Killers of the Flower Moon, but someone this kind of evil you don't expect from Jesse Plemons. And so that kind of contrast shocks you, jolts you a little bit.
Yeah, and plus he's wearing like delightful pink glasses, which I quite liked.
Those glasses are I would love to find out where they got those glasses from. I've never seen glasses like that before.
Yeah, that's a good costuming question, because it's like everything else about him is so like makes so much sense, and then he's just wearing these like crazy, almost like Coachella style.
Give me the Vulture 10,000 word oral history of like where Jesse Plemons got those glasses from in this movie.
I'm sure they've got a team of 50 working on it right now.
Can we talk a bit about the representation of journalism in this film, Thomas? We mentioned earlier that this movie is, it's a war movie, and the action is pretty intense and pretty, I think, like masterfully done. But we are following 4 journalists, and the cast have talked about this film being a love letter to journalism. Garland's father was a political cartoonist. He says he grew up around journalists and has talked a lot in interviews for this movie about the importance of a model of independent, unbiased journalism that he thinks is disappearing, and he wanted these characters to embody.
A free press protects the people against the excesses of government. It is a check and a balance on any and all governments. That's what a free press does. You can't take that away. And you shouldn't disrespect it. I think obviously there's a problem. The problem comes partly from politicians deliberately attacking the press, and it comes partly...
What's really interesting is I'm not totally sure this film is a love letter to journalism. Like, there's questions around the motivations of these journalists. There's questions about whether the work that they're doing is actually fulfilling any kind of greater purpose the way that they think that it is. There's a lot of criticism from journalists that this movie doesn't really show the act of journalism beyond taking photos. It's like, who is the audience for this? What are the stories that they're writing? What's going on? I think that's all really interesting. My kind of take on it is, maybe I'm totally wrong and I'm just reading criticism into this movie of journalism that doesn't exist, but the sense I got was, I think the journalists, like the Wagner character, like the Kirsten Dunst character, think they're doing something incredibly important and meaningful, and the film is sort of revealing that perhaps that's not the case. That maybe this idea of you get that one great shot and people watch it and they read about it and they see the photo and everything changes, the world becomes a better place. I think the movie's kind of saying that doesn't exist. If it ever did, it certainly doesn't exist now. What did you make of the way journalism is portrayed in the film?
Yeah, in the first instance, I found, as a professional journalist at the most esteemed newspaper in the country, the first thing I couldn't really get past was purely like a logistic thing, in that I really struggled at first to be like, well, hold on, who do these guys work for? There's no, like, we do learn later, spoiler alert, that it's Reuters, I believe. But like, who do they work for? Like, who are they filing to? We didn't see much of the practical act of journalism, and that I found a little bit jarring, because journalism films generally get pretty widely criticized for like not showing how the job actually works, and I felt like this did fall into that a bit. I think at the start of the film, we see like Kirsten Dunst filing some photos, and she's like trying to get Wi-Fi at the hotel. Yeah. So like internet exists, but then later on, Kaylee Spenny's character, the young kind of journalist, she's like looking at photos on her phone, but there's no servers, and she makes a comment that there's no internet doesn't really exist in the same way anymore. But I just was like, who is employing this team of journalists? Who is commissioning them to go across the country to interview the president? And even that, we're like, this one interview with the president, we don't know why they want to do it. Like, what will it do exactly? I understand like the general premise of the story, but I just thought at first it was like hard to understand who and why these characters were working. You know, I just thought I found that hard to get over. And then from there, I guess, you know, it was interesting to we work in a media landscape currently that is changing and stretching and trying to redefine itself and figure out new revenue streams as everything changes around the world. This film is set in a slightly near future. I think one character makes a comment about whatever's left of the New York Times. Yeah. So we're trying to get an idea of the landscape that they actually exist in. But yeah, is the point of journalism to, completely remove yourself and never have an opinion or be these vessels for information? And that's a very rose-colored glasses view, I think, especially in this world or a near future. There's a scene where Jessie, played by Kaylee Spenny, expresses concern about, these prisoners of war, and Kirsten Dunst's character says, we don't ask questions, we record so other people ask. And I'm just like, man, we work with journalists every day, and I just don't know if anyone ever speaks like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. I think the bit that is unclear to me, but it's sort of how I read the film, is I think we're supposed to question that model of journalism that is being espoused by someone like Kirsten Dunst. I think it's interesting to sort of look at each of these characters and what they're up to. Like Wagner Moura plays this sort of kind of stereotypical foreign correspondent guy. You mentioned that hotel that they're all in. That really has vibes of, when you see Western journalists reporting from African conflicts or Middle Eastern conflicts. They're in this hotel, the lights are sort of flashing on and off, but they're just getting drunk and partying. And he's this guy who's addicted to adrenaline. He just wants to be in the center of the action. He thinks he's a hero. And the only reason Kaylee Spenny ends up on this road trip with them, we find out, is because he's trying to fuck her, essentially, right? And you're like, okay, cool. That is definitely a model of male foreign correspondent journalist that exists. And, sure, he's brave, but I think there's also a bit there of this guy's kind of a piece of shit. And maybe we should be reckoning with lionizing that sort of model of journalist. Kaylee Spenny, on sort of the other spectrum, she's the newbie, and it's really interesting. She talks about her family. They're back in Missouri. They're just living it up on a farm. They're pretending like this doesn't exist, and she wants to get involved and tell stories, but she's there with this old school film camera. She's developing film in a refugee camp. It's sort of okay, you're just a hobbyist. You're just here because you want to prove that you can leave your family behind and prove yourself as a war photographer, but you don't really seem to understand how any of this works, and why the fuck would you be developing film on the run in this near future? It doesn't really make sense to me. I think Kirsten Dunst's character is the most interesting in that you sort of see her go on this arc where at the start of the film, she's very much we don't involve ourselves. We just report what goes on and other people make decisions about it. And you get these flashbacks to her reporting from conflicts all around the world. And I wonder whether, throughout the movie, she's sort of realizing, fuck, that's all bullshit. I've reported on this stuff. Nothing's gotten better. Conflict has gotten worse. I'm literally reporting on a war zone in my own country now. And you start to see her through her face most of the time, her eyes. Kirsten Dunst's acting, I think, is so powerful in this film because it's not through dialogue. It's more just through the way that she observes and reacts to scenes. I think slowly starts to realize that her entire ideological premise for operating, which is I don't involve myself in conflict. I take these powerful photos. I work with reporters who tell stories, and that helps make the world a better place. I think by the end of the movie, she realizes that's kind of nonsense. And I think if the movie is trying to make that point, I think that's really interesting, but I do think it's not super clear. I think it's kind of confused. I think it also wants us as audience members to clap these journalists and say they're doing such a great job. So ultimately, I think the movie has these interesting ideas about the country and about journalism, but either pulls his punches or is a little bit muddled and doesn't end up with a super coherent message.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think what troubles me is that Garland has been so active on the PR front, really facing this question down and being quite adamant in that, this is the kind of journalism I respect. You know, I got a quote here where it's the kind of journalism we need most, reporting, which used to be the dominant form of journalism, had a deliberate removal of a certain kind of bias. If you have a news organisation which has a strong bias, it's only likely to be trusted to the choir to which it's preaching.
And it also comes from within media organisations that have very deliberately and consciously abandoned a role of journalism as something without bias. Now, it may be impossible to be without bias, but there is a sliding scale, and institutions have chosen to go way down the sliding scale to a point they are essentially propaganda machines, not not really journalists anymore. So they're not trying.
Obviously, that's a valid criticism, and you know, there's so much chat these days in the media landscape about like, do you just talk to an echo chamber and all this type of stuff? But for him to kind of be like, oh yeah, so these, you know, the only true journalism, especially when you're reporting on these types of conflicts, is something that removes any form of bias or any form of meaning or any form of, I guess, critique to try and understand what is happening. I just don't know if that's a reflection of modern journalism, no matter where you land on the spectrum. And I think that's what a lot of people, and, you know, I guess the risk you run when you write a film about journalists is that journalists are going to critique the fuck out of it. But like a lot of people do have this issue where it's like, it's kind of a fantasy land that he's living in where, you know, this is what it should be like. And it's like, well, it's not.
Yeah. And I think what's missing from the movie, and maybe this is the point as well, is like, there's no, like, journalism happens in two phases, right? There's the art of making the story or telling the story, getting the story, and then there's the way it's received by the audience, right? And the impact or whatever after that. And you never see that second half. You never see anyone read a newspaper or read a story or see a photo. In fact, these journalists go around this country and they're treated with contempt. And maybe that's the point. It's like, this is in America where everyone stopped reading journalism, so we're all divided. But if the point is like, we just need to like read those long form articles in the New York Times about how America's become too uncivil, and if only we did that, we'd all be in a better place. That's a pretty limp and hollow message that I don't think is resonant with some of the other ideas that the film grapples with around journalism. So I agree with you. Like, I read those interviews and I'm like, I hear what you're saying, brother, but like, I don't feel like your movie's making that point. I mean, look, I think the movie is good and I think it's definitely worth watching and it's really fun and interesting to talk about these ideas around it. But it sort of like falls short of being like a Children of Men because it doesn't seem to be super clear on how you're supposed to feel at the end. Yeah,
and that's why I think like I loved it and I enjoyed it as like an A24 blockbuster. Like this is their version of Independence Day. I read a quote somewhere that was like, this is a Hollywood film, not a Cannes film.
It's a good point. They spend a lot of money. They're hoping to make a lot of money. It's the biggest opening weekend A24's had. It's a really good point.
Yeah, and like this is exactly, you know, and it's funny, I guess this could be a conversation for a different day on my A24 pod, but it is funny looking at this movie in the context of A24's development over the last 2 years from kind of like fringe, cool company that was making like a few films and was this like art house production company that you would name check if you wanted to sound in, and then, you know, they won a bunch of Oscars. They're now like one of the hottest production companies in town, and obviously they're making bigger and better things. They make more money. Their profit stream is enormous. And so like, will that change the DNA of A24 and by extension the type of films they make? Well, Civil War could be proof that it is.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Is there anything else you want to say about the film, about the performances?
Well, like Kirsten Dunst obviously was the center of this film, but my God, man, you kind of touched on it before, like the facial acting, like no one has ever looked more fed up on film than Kirsten Dunst's character Lee in this movie. Like I just feel like they did it really well. She looked exhausted. She looked like someone that was like living in a civil war. I just thought she was incredible. There's one scene, you know, like she kind of spends much of the film in like very practical, like utilitarian clothes, like, you know, cargo pants and a black shirt, whatever.
Yeah.
And there's one scene in the film when they visit this town that's kind of like weirdly untouched by everything that's going on, and they go into a store and she tries on this dress, and Kaylee Spenny's character kind of like looks at her and asks to take her photo, and it's quite moving because it's like, wow, you know, she sees herself as a different version or a version she used to be. I just thought Kirsten Dunst, from everything, from the way she delivered her lines to the way she looked and the way she conveyed, you know, what that look was supposed to tell us, it was an incredible performance from her, I thought.
I agree, yeah. Not much more to add other than I think she's really going for it. And I think the other performances are fine. Like, there's not like bad acting in this, but she's operating, I think, on another level, a very, very, very high level. Well, Thomas, you pointed out to me one of the greatest ever attempts to segue on this podcast that Kirsten Dunst, you know, in the early 2000s went from starring in Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 to a tennis film called Wimbledon. There's another actress who's followed a very similar career path, at least in a certain phase of their career. Zendaya has gone from starring in 3 Spider-Man films to now featuring in her own tennis film, Challenges. Do you reckon we pulled that off?
Look, I think we did. And can I just blow your mind? I know I love to blow your mind anyway. Can I blow your mind once more?
Yeah, you can.
What superhero film was Emma Stone in?
Whoa. Oh, she was also in Spider-Man. She was in the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man one, right?
Yes. And has she been in a tennis film?
She has been in a tennis film, Battle of the Sexes.
Yes.
Whoa.
So this is like a weird, I don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know what's going on in Hollywood generally, but there's something weird. There is a strange connection between starring
the
in
Spider-Man to tennis film pipeline. There you go.
Correct. So that's a fun intro to what is one of the best films of the year.
Let's talk about challenges. Let's explain to people what this movie's about.
Tashi Duncan, she's going to turn a whole family into millionaires. She'll have a fashion line, a foundation.
You were incredible today.
Thank you.
I mean, it wasn't even like tennis. It was an entirely different game.
Hey, come hang out with us later.
Want me to come tuck you in?
No, we can just keep talking.
It's directed by Luca Gaudignino, who attracted international acclaim, obviously, for Call Me By Your Name. You followed it up with the remake of Suspiria, and I think a little seen, but very, very good Timothée Chalamet cannibal film, Bones and All, which is very fun to say out loud. Interestingly, it was written by the husband of Celine Song, who was nominated for the Oscar for Past Lives. Challenges, I guess it's like a sexy dramedy, you'd call it. The film begins in the middle of a tennis match between two characters played by Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor. Feist's character is an extremely successful athlete, but he's hit a bit of a rough patch, so he's been convinced by his wife and coach, played by Zendaya, to enter this small tournament in upstate New York where he plays the final against O'Connor's character. As they're playing tennis, we flash back to this period where they were teenagers, very, very close friends. They were doubles partners. They meet Zendaya at a fun Adidas party at this cool little mansion. She's a rising tennis star herself. They're obviously infatuated with her because she's very, very, very gorgeous. And that kicks off a competition over the next decade. We see their relationships with each other and with Zendaya wax and wane, and it's all set against this backdrop of this tennis match that we keep cutting to. Challenges, Thomas. What did you think? Sexiest film of the year?
Without doubt, I love tennis and I love near threesomes. This was amazing. I thought I was so excited for challenges. So the film was supposed to open the Venice Film Festival last year, and they pulled it because of the actors' strike. And that makes a lot of sense, I think, when you watch the film, because you cannot promote this film without those three stars.
You need those three on red carpets, taking photos.
100%. Like I went to the premiere in Sydney. I think it was the world premiere, and it was at the State Theatre. It was like an old school premiere, and it took forever to get in. Like, there was lots of things that made me be like, "Oh, this is a fucking punish."
Yeah.
Then the minute those three walked on stage, it was like all washed away. The chemistry and charisma, and also the fact that these are three actors kind of like on the up. It hinged on their performances, and it makes sense that the promo tour for Challenges, I think, is almost as big as the film now. Like, you can't scroll your Instagram without seeing like Zendaya in Paris wearing a dress made out of tennis balls or whatever.
She's doing the sort of Margot Robbie Barbie thing where she's dressing kind of as the character from the film.
100%. But aside from my own personal investment in near threesomes and tennis, I thought it was like a great film. Once again, I'm going to throw to some other friends in the industry. This is Empire Magazine. Their headline: horny, hungry, phenomenally exciting filmmaking. That is Challenges to me. Everyone in this movie is sexier than Paul Atreides, bro. I'm sorry. And I just thought it did so many things well that it was aiming to do. Like, was this an arty kind of like Luca film? Yes. Was this also a worthy entrant into the kind of sports film canon? Yes. Was this an interesting examination of desire and drive and how those things impact relationships? Yes. Was it also a great snapshot of how like friendship changes over time and how, the competitive edge that sometimes makes your youth so illuminating is great and then becomes like a cancer as you get older? Yes. It ticked everything, and also Zendaya is very hot.
I love that review. I was worried about how we would talk about this movie without sort of being sent to jail for, I think it's important to say that, there's been this discourse over the last few years that filmmakers, studios have strayed away from like eroticism and just like sex on screen. Luca, I guess, hasn't really strayed away from that as much, but he is embracing it. This movie is shot in a way to make you think about little else than muscle and body and toned bodies and sex and desire. So if we talk a bit about that, it's not just because we're freaks. Like, that is the point of this movie. It is about different relationship structures, different ways that desire manifests, and sort of the obvious metaphor of relationships through a tennis match. I love tennis as well. I love the Australian Open. It's one of my favorite events on the calendar every year. I loved a lot of the way that this movie made you just feel like you were part of like a tennis circuit without telling you, like just showing you the way that these players move throughout that world. I thought Zendaya was astonishing. I thought all the performances were really good, but Zendaya is doing something special, like particularly because this movie is set over, I guess, like 12 or 13 years. The way that the characters play themselves as a bit more vulnerable and naive when they're younger, and then in the kind of modern day era of the film, the contemporary part, Zendaya's like a mother and in a very different phase of her life. And her ability to do both of those things in very, very interesting ways, I thought was astonishing. I liked a lot of this movie, man. I really enjoyed it. I thought the framing device of that tennis match being this metaphor for dynamics and relationships, you know, serve, volley, underhand, backhand, these are all words we use to describe friendships, relationships, romance, just the way that we talk and communicate to one another. The sexual tension between the three of them and the desire for control, I think that Zendaya's character has, it's all very good. But I mean, this is not even like a criticism, I guess, because the more I've thought about the film since leaving it, the more I've been satisfied by what it served up, pardon the pun. I just had this feeling throughout. I was waiting for like a penny to drop, you know? The movie isn't about a lot, and that's fine. And it's, you know, it's fundamentally just basically using tennis to talk about sex and the way that we interact. It felt like at moments it was edging to something closer again. Sorry for the pun.
There was a fair bit of edging going on in the cinema.
And to me, it didn't seem like it landed anything bigger. But then, as I've thought about it, like I said, it's a bit of a slight film. That's fine. Like, that's what this movie was about. It was hot. It was funny at moments. It told a discrete story. And that's good. And it did it in a really good way. And maybe it's just like, after watching Civil War, I was like, what does Challenges have to say about the state of modern America? Not a lot. And that's fine. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, fully. And that's the thing. It's not a film that is like really about anything. It's just about these three characters and, you know, this like portion of their lives. The whole movie is about, especially Zendaya, who plays Tashi, her character, you know, was like kind of this meant to be the next big thing and then suffers an injury and kind of becomes a top coach with her husband. But like we know about her, all she cares about is like winning and like being good. Doesn't matter like how you get there, what happens or what you take away from it. It's just like the end result. And I kind of think that's what the film is doing. Like it doesn't matter if, you know, you take home something. It's just like, was this good? Yes. Like I think the film is really good and all the parts work together and you don't need to walk out of the cinema and be like, oh, like what did we learn from that? Like it was just like this visual, like sexual experience that people seem to really be enjoying. And on top of that, I do think there is like lots of stuff in there to take away. But yeah, I don't know that it needs to be a film that teaches you anything or has any moments that convey a broader message about, I don't know, whatever, contemporary life. It's just this interesting snapshot of three characters who exist in a world that is, you know, painted beautifully by Luca.
Yeah, one of the things that surprised me about the film, and the movie's just out this week, so I don't want to delve into spoiler territory with specific scenes, but the marketing around the film and certainly the trailer make you think it's about this love triangle, right, between Josh O'Connor, Mike Feist, and Zendaya. And certainly that is an element to it. One of the things that really surprised me in a really good way is how this movie is also fundamentally about the relationship between Feist and O'Connor. Like from their friendship, like the threesome scene that is teased in the trailer. Yeah, I really don't want to give it away, but like it goes in an interesting direction that then becomes part of the DNA of the rest of the movie. And like the sexual tension between those two guys throughout the film is done extraordinarily. Like it's really, really interesting. And at lots of moments, Zendaya becomes sort of like a puppet master. She's in there, but she's sort of pulling these guys away from each other, pushing them together at certain moments. I really enjoyed that dynamic, that aspect of the film.
Yeah, and that was so funny, like seeing it in the cinema with like a really jazzed audience at the premiere. That, as you said, that threesome scene where they're kind of sitting on the bed, it's like on a lot of the posters and it makes it a big part of the trailer. Like people are aware of that scene. And the direction that it ends up going was such a big moment in the cinema. Like, you know, like people reacting and like laughing and clapping and stuff. Like it was really interesting to see. And I mean, look, it's a surprise to no one that watches Lucas films that there are, you know, like kind of these like homosexual queer undertones. But I thought when you insert that like masculinity and the like physicality of the tennis circuit, and especially because, you know, I think like we're both into tennis and these are people that spend like so much time on tour together. They're working out together. They're in the showers. They're having steams. Like, there's a really, good steam scene between the two male leads. Like, it's all part of the world. Like, no one can pretend that it's not. And I just thought he did such a good job of exploring that. And yeah, it then does become, like, I must admit, when I very first saw the Challengers trailer, like way back before the writer's strike, I was like, oh my God, sexy threesome movie with Zendaya. This is going to be like insane. And then the end result is very different, but I enjoyed it like even more than I thought I would.
Let's talk about the sex for a second, because for a movie that is definitely sexy and erotic, I'm saying that word so much, so I prefaced it with the thing, because it is a big part of the movie, and everyone, like, there's a lot of conversation about this being like the return of the erotic thriller. There's actually not that many, or if any, like explicit sex scenes. Like, you see the prelude to sex and you sort of see the aftermath of sex, and I think part of that is deliberate, because I think one of the things Luca's trying to do is keep the kind of fornicating on the tennis court. Like, the real sweaty, grunting action is on the court, and what you see off the court is the cerebral aftermath or prelude to these sorts of events. I think that's really interesting, but it is at the same time kind of fascinating that a movie that everyone is discussing as being the sexiest film of the year doesn't really show explicit sex. And maybe that's just, there's a lot of conversation around intimacy coordinators and just sex scenes by their very nature being kind of exploitative. Zendaya was a producer on this film. She also, was on Euphoria, which has lots of very well-known, like, complaints from actors about the way that sex was used. So I wonder whether it's a very deliberate attempt behind the scenes to make a film feel sexy without needing to put actors in a situation where they seem to be increasingly uncomfortable actually portraying sex on film. Did that stand out to you at all, or am I just a weird horny freak who missed something on screen?
I mean, I do think you are a weird horny freak, but that's unrelated to this conversation. No, but I think it all comes down to the way in which it's shot, and even like if you rewatch Call Me by Your Name, obviously there are some very like horny graphic fruit scenes, but in terms of like the actual amount of like sex, like carnal sex in that film, it's not like the like Timothy and the what's a cannibal's name? Armie Hammer. It's not like they're like fucking all the time and stuff, and like it's not
alleged cannibal, we should say, just in case.
Yes, the alleged cannibal army. Imagine that being your fucking Instagram bio. Anyway, but like the amount of like explicit sex is not the point. I think it's the way in which Luca ties it all together. So you are from the very start, you can tell when they first like lay eyes on Zendaya, there is this tension and chemistry that is just like informing the entire film. And so you don't need to literally see like Zendaya and her husband having sex, or her having sex with Josh O'Connor's character, or the two men, kind of consummating this intense chemistry that is like buzzing the entire time, because so much of it is done for you in like, the lingering looks, or, the way it's shot is so like, it feels like fucking Benny Benassi's Satisfaction half the time.
That's good. Top 3 threesomes?
In film?
My mum listens to this podcast. Let's not go down that path.
Okay, cool. I'll send them to you that.
I want to talk about the music in this film for a second. I think there's 2 different bits to it. I think the soundtrack has some really fun needle drops. I love when like directors are just like, I want a party scene in the mid to late 2000s that just like hits, a pleasure center in our brain. There's a great Nelly Hot in Here needle drop, Blue Cantrell hit 'em up style. Both those songs sort of underscore interesting moments of the film as well. But most of the score of this film is done by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I mean, these guys are amazing, right? They've been killing it since The Social Network and Gone Girl through to Killer, and they did the Bones and All soundtrack as well. I just don't think they've missed. I thought the soundtrack was great. I thought the way it was used to score the tennis scenes was fun. It's propulsive. It's like this 80s techno sort of a vibe. But then Luca does this interesting thing where he brings those tracks that normally you just leave on in an action sequence, or in this case, the sport matches, and he brings them in for these intimate dialogue scenes. And I guess maybe what he's trying to say is like these verbal sparring matches that partners have, it's just like tennis, so I'm going to score it the same way. But I actually felt that they kind of overwhelmed the intimacy and the acting, and at some moments I actually found it like kind of hard to tell what was going on. What did you make of the soundtrack?
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. I no spoilers, but in the very final scene, which involves the tennis match, I thought the use of music there was like masterful. But I do think that it was one of those things like in the edit suite, someone should have gone in and been like, "All right, Luca, like you're losing your mind a little bit. Like less is sometimes more." And it's such a trademark of his, but I do feel like it was overwhelming. I also think probably my one other issue or only issue with the film was there's a lot of time jumps. You kind of touched on it earlier. Like, you know, we meet them as teenagers, then we jump forward. Suddenly Zendaya's got like a mum haircut where it's short, so we know she's like sensible in her mum era or whatever. But I do think
that's sensible.
Not that sensible. But I do think the time jumps sometimes became distracting. There were so many scenes where, especially as she, you know, reconnects with Josh O'Connor's character when, you know, he is set to play her husband at this like kind of low level tournament, that the dialogue is so great between them and then it just like cuts short. I felt that maybe there was one too many of those. It almost felt like perhaps a film where just a few fewer ideas would have been great.
Yeah, from the cinematic perspective, from the perspective of how it's shot and sort of edited and put together. I think so too. I think it was a little bit choppy at times, but generally I like the structure of the movie where there is this overarching sort of tennis match that takes place and then you have these flashbacks, but you get closer and closer to real time, so they kind of almost collapse in on each other. People might make fun of me for saying this, but it kind of reminded me of Dunkirk, like the Nolan movie, where there's these different timelines, but then by the end they've all merged into sort of one. I think that was a cool sort of framing for the film. Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about this one other than it is, you know, despite sort of my initial hesitation, the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, really, I think it's like a really fun and interesting and exciting film. And we talked about Zendaya a bit, but in a way you can't talk about her enough because she is so good in this movie. She's in more scenes. I think she's in basically almost every single scene except for a couple. And the way, the scenes where there is this like tension between her and either Feist or O'Connor or both are just done so well. I could have watched 20 more of them.
It really is her movie, and you've seen that from the way it's been promoted to, you know, the trailer and everything. Like, she is kind of like at the center of it. I thought it was funny, like the poster for Challenges basically features like a close-up of Zendaya's face wearing like these sunglasses that are like purple hearts, and then in the reflection of the sunglasses you can see the two guys. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know about this film. Like, and you know, it's really interesting. I've read lots of articles comparing her to Julia Roberts, which is a comparison that is happening to a lot of people. Also, her Euphoria co-star Sydney Sweeney. People are heralding her as the new Julia Roberts. I don't know how Julia Roberts feels about being the old Julia Roberts, but like I kind of know what they mean, because obviously, you know, Julia Roberts was so ubiquitous in the 90s as this kind of like, you know, she did serious films, she did rom-com, she could kind of do it all, and I guess we're wanting to fill that. And you know, I just think Zendaya has something a bit different though. Like she's so magnetic in this film. She's, you know, amazing in Euphoria and stuff, but this, I mean, June, obviously it's hard for anyone to kind of come out looking good in that stinkfire, but the fact that she's so like, she looks so detached in this, but magnetic. It's something that's like really interesting about her face. I don't know, but yeah, this was definitely another like feather in the cap for the increasingly impressive Zendaya back catalogue.
Yeah, really good point. I mean, like the Spider-Man franchise is big, and you know, she's a big successful part of that. Despite your hate of June Part 2, like that's a huge film that she is great in as well. And so already, like, you know, we're 4.5 months into the year and she is a big part of two very different but very big and very good movies. She's like on a heater right now. Excited to see what she does next.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, Thomas, before we wrap, we have our regular Impress Your Friend segment where we share something we watched, read, listened to, otherwise consumed in the past week. I'm segueing to this one as well. Josh O'Connor, who we were just talking about, is in cinemas in Australia right now with a film that actually was released, I think, in other parts of the world last year. It's called La Chimera. It's a cracking Italian film. He plays a British archaeologist in Tuscany, embroiled in a network of grave robbers who are essentially looting ancient artifacts. Our reviewer said that this film is like Fellini meets Tomb Raider. Like, what more do you want? It's really fun. He's really, really great in this movie. I'm not like a big Crown guy, so I didn't really know him from The Crown. But between La Chimera and Challenges, I think he's like also one to watch. And this is, in cinemas at the moment, I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, that sounds good. I love Tomb Raider, so that sounds bang up my alley.
Actually, can I mention one other quick thing before we go to yours? I mentioned this on the podcast, I think last week. New HBO series, The Sympathizer. The first episode dropped this week. It's the adaptation of Viet Thanh Nguyen's 2015 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel. It stars Australian Hua Shonday, Robert Downey Jr., directed by Park Chan-wook. I talked about it a bit more last week. I just want to say the show's out now. I've rewatched the first episode. It's really good. It's really, really good. If you want some prestige TV, give it a spin.
That also sounds great.
What have you got for us?
This week I've got a really weird one, and one that kind of caught me off guard. It's Baby Reindeer on Netflix.
Man, I'm glad you chose this. I've not seen it, but I've heard a lot of people talking about it. Break this one down.
Okay, firstly, like, this is a show that is worth watching, but it comes with like every single possible trigger warning that you could need. So just like bear that in mind. It was one of those ones where, like, you know, I'm sitting on the lounge the other night and wasn't sure what to watch. I opened up Netflix. This was like on the splash screen. I Googled it and it had 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. And what opens as almost like a Fleabag-esque comedy quickly turns into something very dark. I guess what you need to know is this is a show by Richard Gadd, an English comedian. It's based on his real-life one-man stand-up show called Baby Reindeer, which he premiered at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 2019. And it basically tells his real story about meeting a woman in a pub who would soon become a real-life stalker. And the one-man show featured all these, like, you know, she left him 40,000 hours of voicemail, sent over 50,000 emails, and he kind of talks about, not only is it this, you know, I guess crazy story about a stalker, but it also delves into like what makes a problematic victim in terms of himself and his behaviors and how he kind of deals with things or fails to deal with things. It's an incredible like story, and the fact that you know that Richard Gadd, who is playing himself in this show, like this all happened to him, only makes it more insane. It's funny, it's heartbreaking. Episode 4 is one of the most like disturbing and important episodes of TV I've watched in a long time. I couldn't recommend it enough, but definitely know what you're getting into. That is Baby Reindeer on Netflix. It's 7 episodes, and the finale will fucking blow your mind, and then you will spend like hours researching the real story.
Wow. I'm really, really stoked by that plug from you, because you sort of see people chatting about this, you see it pop up and like, is this like worth giving a go? But like, I'm very, very excited.
Yes, it's definitely worth watching.
Thomas Mitchell, great talking films with you. Take care. See you next week.
Ciao.
This episode of The Drop was produced by Chi Wong. If you enjoyed listening to today's episode of The Drop, make sure to follow us in your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, or better yet, send it to all of your friends. It's pretty good. I'm Osman Faruqi. See you next week.